Well, here we are again, folks. Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. We just did a little 30-minute series in the Southern Kingdom, which was the kingdom after when all of the children of Israel was split right down the middle. The kingdom was split down the middle. The land was. It became brother against brother, sister against sister, father against father, and that's the way it was. Well, we're going to look at the northern kingdom now. But let's start out this way. It referred to as Israel and Ephraim. This, remember now, the other side, the southern side, was referred to as Judah. And by the way, do you remember what tribe Jesus came from? All right. So it began in 1931 BC, 1931 before Christ. The first ruler was Jeroboam. He was the first ruler. The last ruler was Hosea. The total number of rulers was 19. Not one was saved. Not one of these rulers out of 19 were saved men. So this was a chaotic time for them. It consisted of 10 tribes. 10! Listen to this. Out of 12 tribes, 10 of them were over here in rebellion. They were over in rebellion in the northern kingdom. They were in rebellion against God. Their capital was Samaria. And if you remember, Samaria was a very, very heathen place. There was everything under the sun going on there. They were captured by the Assyrians in 721 BC. Now we saw that the southern kingdom had got captured by the Babylonians. Now we're looking at the other kingdom over here getting won over by the Assyrians. There was no return for captivity. It lasted 210 years, from 931 to 721. Now, when God does something, if He separates something, it's up to Him whether He wants to put it back together or not. Well, He put the country back together. But how did He put the country back together and did away with the dividing line? He did it by having other people capture these people. See, we're looking at one little section of land. If you draw a donut on this section of land and split it across the middle, one half was the northern kingdom and the other half was the southern kingdom. But above them were the Assyrians. And over here in the southern kingdom, below them were the Babylonians. They were great people. They were great, horrendous, thousands, millions of people. They were warriors. They knew how to go to battle, and they knew how to win over. So here the Babylonians over here took this half. And undoubtedly what happened is they stole the children away. We see Daniel was stolen away by the Babylonians, and he was over there at where that king was. Remember, he was supposed to bow down to him and do all that. He was a young man when he was stolen away. We see that they didn't come in and take the land over, but they stole the people away. They killed the men, took the women for themselves, and took the children to raise up as servants and workers. And that's the way it was in the southern and northern kingdom. It began in 931 and ended 210 years later. The first ruler was Jeroboam. The last one was Hosea. The total number of kings were 19. You say, Brother Peter, you just told us all of that. I'm reviewing what I just told you so you can hear it. And it consisted of 10 tribes. I've read it, by the way, several times, and I wrote it down with my hand by pen so I would know what I read and understand and remember what I said and what I remember, even though I'm having a problem with recall today. The capital later became Samaria. And that's where everything happened. The Assyrians' culture took over in that area. And by the way, where Samaria was, if you'll study the Bible, it was on the trade route from east to west. It was on the trade route of things that came in on a ship, came in through Samaria, and everything in the whole known world ended up being portrayed in this area of Samaria. It was captured by the Assyrians in 721, and there was no return from captivity for the southern kingdom. For 326 years they were in captivity, and they were in array, and they got dispersed. What happened in that period of time, Brother Peter? I tell you what happened. Those women that one time were Jewish women were married to these Gentile people, and they had children, and their children married just anybody they wanted, Jewish, Gentile, whatever. They married Assyrians and Babylonians. They married people that came over, perhaps from China or other places, that came in trade ships, and they brought in, and from Africa they brought ivory in, and they brought tusks, they brought barrels of liquor in, they brought all this stuff from everywhere, and everybody married everybody, and it was a great big hullabaloo where they did a lot of naked stuff, and it was almost like America today. Matter of fact, it was probably nearly as bad as America today. And so let's look at the kings in the northern side. There were Jeroboam, and his duration of time was 22 years. I tell you what this reminds me of. Here's a heathen king. He's a heathen man. He has a lot of authority. It reminds me of a movie star getting an Oscar and setting it on his chest of drawers. What good is it? Here's a man that had everything. He was the great king, Jeroboam, the great king, Jeroboam. Oh, a great king. 22 years and he became an outcast. 22 years and he was nothing. He was Ghana. He was a Ghana. Wow, look at that. 1 Kings 11:26 to 14:20, or 2 Chronicles 9:29 to 13:22, and you got the record. Here this king came in. He served as a cabinet member under Solomon, but fled to Egypt to escape the king's wrath. He was a cabinet member under Solomon. When Solomon died, wow. Ain't nobody like this guy, Jeroboam. You want to get rid of him right quick like. He led the revolt against the 10 tribes at Shechem. Wow. He was against the very tribes that were in the country where he was. See, he was in the north, and those 10 tribes were in the north, and here's a man that, if you read and study, he came against them. He had false religions and caused Israel to sin. Israel were God's chosen people, but they followed these pagan religions. His pagan altar destroyed his aunt, paralyzed, and his son stricken by God due to his sin. Wow. God was on the scene. You say, well, why didn't God do something sooner? The Lord works in his own time. He has his own set way. By the way, God doesn't live in time. You and I do. We live in time. A day to God is 1,000 years. A day to us, 24 hours. All right. He was defeated in battle by Abijam, the second king of the south. The second king of the south had defeated him. And we can see that if we get into the southern kings. And right here, Abijam was the second king. He was in there from 914 to 911 BC, and he was only in there 3 years. But during his 3-year reign, he defeated Jeroboam. If you weigh those kings, find out now. Hey, you say, well, I'm reading the Bible, and it says King Jeroboam, King Jeroboam. And at the same time, now listen, it's saying King Rehoboam. And I used to do that. I'd be studying and I'd say it says Rehoboam. And then I'd say, well, it says Jeroboam. Which one was the king? Rehoboam or Jeroboam? They were both kings in the same period of time. Both of them were kings in the same period of time. 2 Chronicles 9:31 and 12 through 16. 2 Chronicles 9:29 and 13 through 22, you'll find Jeroboam, and then in 9:31 you find Rehoboam. They're both in the same period of time. They're both doing their thing. One's in the north and one's in the south, and the land split down the middle. He was stricken with a plague from God and died. Jeroboam was stricken with a plague from God and died. Wow. He was brought up by God. The Holy Spirit brought Jeroboam up before God and said, this man right here needs to be done away with. We need to do away with him. And he was stricken by a plague. And then the second northern ruler king was Nadab. And he was the son of Jeroboam. So when Jeroboam was stricken, his son took over. And in that day, it was not uncommon for a son, just like in England today, the lineage goes on and the next one takes up. But he was assassinated by a rebel named Baasha. Now that's kind of an important name, Baasha. Look that up. When you're studying, you'll see his name. Now these guys, there were some guys over there that were they were knife men. I wish I could get it all in my head because I've really studied that, and it's not coming up to me right now. Now Baasha came up after Nadab. Wow, he is the third king over here in the northern kingdom, and his duration was 24 years. He's like a movie star that puts his Oscars on his mantle or somewhere, and then dies and leaves them behind. They don't take them with him, and while he's got them, they don't do him a bit of good. If he could sell them for what it cost to make them, even, and put it into his. A lot of these guys died paupers. I don't know for sure, but I understand, and I've heard some people saying that the biggest business in over there in California is the pawn shops where those movie stars live. They have to hawk their $1 million jewelry to go out on the town for a night. All right, Baasha killed Nadab, and thus fulfilled Ahiah's, the prophet's prediction. By the way, it had been prophesied that he would do that. He fought with Asa, the third king of the south, and built a wall to cut off trade to Jerusalem. Did you know that there had been a wall built, just like the wall between Russia, the wall that the president said tear that wall down, that was there. There was a wall built at that time between the north and the south, and his seed was predicted to suffer the same judgment as Jeroboam, and he did. Back when it was prophesied, before he came up, Baasha, he was prophesied what he was going to do and what was going to happen to him, how he was going to die. Hey, if you'll study the Bible enough, you're going to find a lot of these cases that were prophesied, that who was going to come, when they were going to come, what they were going to do, and how they were going to die. And then there was Elah, and he was only in 2 years. He was the son of Baasha. Now we've got a third generation being a king over here. This third generation, he was assassinated by a soldier rebel while drunk. Here's a drunk king and got assassinated by one of his rebels. And then we have Zimri. Zimri only stays in 7 years. He fulfilled the prophecy of slaughtering Baasha's seed. Hey, if you read this story, read it like a story. Read it like a story. Read it by a story that God had wrote down. Interesting. He was the son of Baasha. He was assassinated by a soldier while drunk. Zimri, he fulfilled the prophecy of killing Baasha's seed. He was trapped by a rebel soldier in his own palace while he was resulting in a fiery suicidal death. He died more or less by like suicide. He couldn't get out of the fire. And then we had Omri come along, and he made Samaria the northern capital. Now this was a wicked thing. When he made Samaria the northern, that was a wicked thing. Samaria was more wicked than Washington is, if that's possible. And so it was. And he was the most powerful king up to his time. So we saw we had 5 kings before him. He was the 6th king, but he became the most powerful king. He was also arranged the marriage of his son Ahab to Jezebel. You remember Jezebel and Ahab were married? And the first ruler was Rehoboam. And I'm not going to read that because that's my other half of my thing. I'm going over the kings right now. All right, the 7th king was Ahab. And Ahab was married to Jezebel. His Baal worshiping practice caused a great famine to fall upon the land, because these folks, remember now, were part of God's original 12 tribes, and here they are, the 10 tribes over there, and now they've lined up with all these heathens, and they're worshiping Baal. And they literally put their children in Molech's arms. Molech was a god, steel god, that had his arms on, had fire under it, and it was red hot. And they would have a baby and put it in Molech's arm and sacrifice it to Molech. He was allowed to defeat the Syrians on 2 occasions to prove a point. He tricked godly king Jehoshaphat, the 4th king of Judah, into a 12-fold compromise in a military battle. His death for his many sins was predicted by three prophets predicted his death, Ahab's death. And listen to it. The death of Jezebel, his wife, was also predicted by Elijah. He experienced a brief but temporary foxhole type conversion. It wasn't a real one. And this is in 1 Kings 21:29. He was killed in the battle with Syria. He went to battle with Syria and he got killed there. Ahab was a wicked man. Jezebel was a wicked woman. Both of them suffered torment in their death. And he was. Then we got Ahaziah, and he was the oldest son of Ahab and Jezebel. Now remember, we had family lines over here that went down 5 kings. Now we're going to see here's some more kingly line passed on. He pursued Jehoshaphat to enter into a shipbuilding enterprise with him in Azon-Geber. He persuaded a godly king to go into business with him. He suffered a severe fall, which proved fatal in his palace in Samaria. He turned to the pagan god Baal-zebub for healing. He was rebuked for this by Elijah, whom he unsuccessfully attempted to arrest. Let me tell you a little story. Every time there was a king, there was a prophet. I said that in my first excerpt on this matter. Every time there was a king, there was a prophet. God had a prophet there for everything that was going to happen. Jeroboam, he was the youngest son of Ahab and Jezebel. Now we're going down 3 generations, and here comes another one. He persuaded Jehoshaphat to go ally with him against Syria. Elijah the prophet performed a miracle for Jehoshaphat's sake, which won the battle. Now see, here's Jehoshaphat. We're Christians. If you're a Christian, are you a Christian? Are you supposed to be Christ-like? Have you asked Jesus Christ to forgive you of your sin, come into your heart and save your soul? If that's the case, do not hook up with the world. You may have a good friend, got a good business. He said, hey, come over and go in partnership with me. If that friend is a lost man and he does not confide in Jesus Christ and follow God, you better not hook up with him. I did it. My preacher told me. I told my preacher what I was going to do. He said, make sure he's a Christian. So I asked him. He said, yeah, I am. Next thing I know, I was hooked up with him, and he was a dope addict. No question about it. And back when I was a poor man, but I had got to a place where I had 2 trucks, 2 sets of ladders, 2 sets of brushes, 2 sets of everything. I was ready to go into a good-sized business and had more work than I could handle. That's why I took this guy on. Within 4 months, he had one of my trucks, all of my ladders, that whole truck, that whole business. He finished that job by himself. He collected the money. I never got a penny because I hooked up wrong. This principle back here that you're seeing in these kings, the prophets telling them what they're telling them, is the same exact thing I did. I hooked up with the wrong man. I ended up losing. Then we got Jehu. Jehu comes along. We're missing some points. We're going to skip some points on Jeroboam. Let's see. Jeroboam was on the throne when God used 4 lepers to save Samaria from starvation. I don't understand why God would do that. They were starving to death. I don't understand why God did it, but he did it. He was finally murdered by Jehu in the valley of Jezreel. He was anointed by a messenger from Elijah. Jehu was anointed by a messenger from Elijah. He was known for his bloodletting. He executed Judah's king Ahaz, not to be confused with Ahab, older son or grandson of Jehoshaphat. The northern king Joram and Jezebel, Ahab's 70 sons, relatives and friends, 42 royal princes of Judah, and the Baal worshippers. And he killed all of them. And let's see, I got to get going here because I've only got a few minutes left. So I'm going to run these other kings real quick. We got the 11th king is Jehoahaz. Mark this down, write it down, get you a pen, a piece of paper, and stop this thing for a minute and get ready to write down these scriptures. 2 Kings 13, 1 through 9. He was in 17 years. He was the son of Jehu. He saw his army almost whipped in Syria. He expanded a brief period of remorse over his sins, but did not genuinely repent. And then we had Jehoash, Joash, and he visited Elijah on his deathbed. He defeated 6 kings of Judah on the battlefield. That's his brothers. That's his relatives. He defeated 6 of his own relatives on the battlefield. We got to move on. Jeroboam 2. He ruled longer than any other king. He ruled 41 years. There's a lot said about him. He recovered much of Israel's lost territory. Now he went from the north to the south, and he recovered much of their lost territory from other tribes and other people. And there was Zechariah. He was a great-grandson of Jehu and the 4th ruler in his dynasty. Then there was Sholem. He was in only 1 month. He was murdered by a cruel soldier named Menahem. And Menahem took over and ruled 10 years after he killed him. And he was one of Israel's most brutal dictators. And then there was Pekah. He was the son of Menahem, and he was killed by his army commander, Pekah. And the 18th king was only 8 years old. They decided that the first 12 years were shared by a co-regency arrangement with both Menahem and Pekah. He joined Syria in an unsuccessful attempt to punish Judah for their refusal to team against Assyria. See, God's people couldn't join up with these other people. And so they got punished because they wouldn't do it. He said, well, if you won't go with us, you'll be our enemy. So he joined Syria in an unsuccessful attempt. All right. He saw Asa captured some of Israel's northern and eastern cities. He was assassinated by Hosea. Remember, there's more than one Hosea in the Bible. There's more than one of many of the people in the Bible. There are more people, there are 2 or 3 people with the same name in lots of cases in the Bible. So don't confuse them. He was Israel's final king. He joined with Egypt in rebellion against Assyria. For this, he was imprisoned in Assyria. Now, I have, with each one of these kings, I have several paragraphs of stories and writings about them. And they are good. Let me tell you to get this, Wilmington's Guide to the Bible. You do not have to join the seminary, Brother Dennis's seminary, to buy this book. You can go online and find Wilmington's Guide to the Bible. Anywhere from $9 to $35 it will cost you. And get this book. It is the best breakdown of the King James Version Bible you can possibly find. And it's the King James Version's the only Bible that I do use. Just for instance, let's look at Jeroboam in the northern kingdom. Jeroboam was the first ruler in the northern kingdom. And the first ruler in the southern kingdom was who? And the first ruler in the southern kingdom was Rehoboam. And remember, we spoke about this earlier in our study, that at the same time Rehoboam was in, Jeroboam was in. And then when Abijam was in, Nadab was in. Now those were 2 kings written in the Bible, both at the same time. So remember, when you're studying, you got 2 different kingdoms. One whole chapter may be in one kingdom, another chapter be in another kingdom. Talking about a different king, a different set of circumstances, and things are all going different. So get your brain together and get things together and get them right, so that you're not doing as I've done in times past, which would be to quote something that was happening in the southern kingdom as something that was happening in the northern kingdom, when it wasn't so. It was happening down in God's land, down where God actually gave them some good kings, and they actually had some righteous kings, even though those kings kind of fell by the wayside before they got out of the kingdom thing. So here we are now, and the last ruler was Zedekiah. The total number of rulers were 29 kings and 1 queen. 8 of them were righteous. 8 of them were righteous. That's in the northern kingdom. That's in the northern kingdom. Remember now, we just took the kings out of the southern kingdom and went over them. Let's look back at the northern kingdom. All right, the northern kingdom was the bad kingdom. And so we see that they were not the ones with the good kings. They had some kings that did pretty good for the people, but they were not religious. They were not saved kings. They were all lost kings. Now, in the southern part, we saw that we had, I don't remember right now, but I think we had quite a number of kings that were saved kings. And so it consisted of different tribes. Remember, there were 10 tribes over there. And so we got to get our heads straight here and keep ourselves straight here. We were talking about Rehoboam defeating the supernatural invasion of the northern king, Jeroboam, in the battlefield. In spite of God's help, at this time, he later degenerated into being a real wicked king. He was a wicked king, and it was not a good king. And so many of those kings did that. All right, our time's come and gone. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.